Okay, I think we should get started there. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the faculty forum. Oh, hi, Colin. There you are. Are you okay? Do you need to catch your breath? Um,
Uh, do I need to catch my breath? I just need to share my screen. Is that okay? Am I
do
the
you
first
have slides?
speaker?
Okay, yeah, just hold on one second.
Yeah.
Welcome to the first faculty forum of this year. And I suppose this is something that I know Colin has been particularly interested in and something we haven't done in a while. And that's really try to have a look a little bit over the horizon. And for those of you who were at council this morning, you heard about, even the demographic changes that are going to be happening that will affect the university as well as the rest of the population. And I suppose it's something it's really good to maybe when we're not in a crisis to think about where we're going in the longer term. So we have three speakers, great speakers for you this afternoon. We're going to have Professor Colin Doherty, who, as you probably know, is head of the School of Medicine. And then he's going to be followed by Rupa Maria, who is a professor from UCSF, but currently here in Ireland enjoying beautiful Wicklow. And then we have Professor Laurent Musilek, who is also, I think, familiar to many people as Dean of the Trinity Business School. And then we're going to be followed by a panel discussion, and I'll introduce the panel afterwards. So, Colin, if you're ready, do you want to go ahead and see if you can? You do. Great. That looks okay. So I'll let you go.
Great. Apologies to everybody. I'm here in the faculty boardroom, actually, Brian, because I thought we were all meeting in person. That's why I was foostering there. But anyway, so how much time do I have? Anyway, you'll just
25
stop.
minutes, Colin.
25
25
minutes.
minutes.
Okay. So I probably don't even need that amount, but I will you just maybe give me a 5-minute warning. So look, I think this title is interesting. I think Lena and I cooked it up, and I think it's an interesting title. And I think the idea that we need to think beyond the usual, 5 years that we're always mandated to do by government is a good idea, especially in the world we live in now. And I think the next 25 years is very important. And I think any strategy we write in the School of Medicine, I'm hoping that we will be looking to the 25-year horizon. I don't have solutions here. I'm sort of going to propose some challenges and opportunities. Broadly might outline where I think we want to go in the School of Medicine, and obviously conscious that there's people from all across the health sciences here. So I'm trying not to be too didactic. I will say that I had thought about bringing just 2 slides, being very provocative. Now I have more than 2, but there's really 2 main messages here that I want to get across. So first of all, I would say there's 3 big challenges, and I've nominated them in the following way. I think one is a very prosaic thing, historical challenge in a place like Trinity College as a public higher education institute, which I won't spend an awful lot of time on, but I have 1 slide on that. There's 2 existential questions for us going forward for the next 25 years. And one I've called poetic and one I've called dystopian, and you'll see why in a moment. So, and they were the 2 slides that I was going to bring, and I was going to leave it at that, but I have a few more words to say on it. So first of all, on the historic and prosaic issues, the governance and the operations of our institutions are terribly, what's the word, sticky. And, it's like walking through treacle. And it's been my job. I was saying to the school executive this morning, we had a meeting, I was listening to this fantastic speech that Zohran Mandami gave this morning in his acceptance speech. And he said that his administration was going to be one of competence and compassion. And I wouldn't mind if I leave this medical school and people had an idea that the school was more competent and it was a compassionate place. And it might not be, the measurement of what compassion is a little bit more squidgy than what competence is. But we really need to overhaul the governance and operations of our schools, particularly the School of Medicine, which is crazy, flat structured school. And it's the idea that governance change has been on the cards for 15, 17 years. And I'm committed to pushing through the changes that are needed. On the cultural side, look, we talk to students, we talk to staff. The idea, we talk a lot about well-being, about belonging, about respect, about diversity. And I think we might I'm unwilling to admit this, that we probably tick a lot of boxes, and whether they really are changed into real meaningful cultural change, I worry about that. And that comes down to the compassion side of things. And I think we have a challenge there. And look, funding, finances, they're always a challenge, but maybe not as big as a challenge as some of the other things, and I'll come to that at the end. So that's just a historic, prosaic challenge. I think every school, I'd be very surprised if every school in a university doesn't have these challenges. But look, the existential, what I'm calling poetic, is the climate emergency. And this is why I put up these Lancet Commission grand challenges. Promote actions and policies that reduce carbon emissions and promote health. Build climate resilient, low carbon health systems, and implement public health measures that protect citizens. If we don't have something to say about these, and I mean internally, in terms of the education that we give to our students, the courses that we run at postgraduate level, the kind of people and the capacity we hire to manage these things. And then externally, we don't have something to say to the people that we would have influence over, like the government, like the policymakers, not just in Ireland, but in Europe. We're going to be the president. We're going to be the president of the European Commission next July. At the World Health Summit, I was invited to a meeting with the French and German ambassadors, and they wanted me to make representations as a member of the Academic Alliance of the World Health Summit, so that Ireland will make an issue of global health, particularly in relation to climate. And I'm trying to make those connections, and I need your help to make those connections. So to me, this is one of our existential. I call it poetic because even though as individuals we look at this list and we say, well, what can I do in this list? What can I do? I think there's a real sense of despair and fatalism when you're an individual looking at that list. But as a group of people who work in both healthcare and higher education, healthcare, if it was a country, would be the 8th biggest polluter in the world. And we have something to say, and we have something to do, and we have a way of influencing the development of the healthcare system in relation to its sustainability. And I'm delighted that we have a great partner in James's Hospital that's already won awards for its sustainability, and it wants to move into another huge area of sustainability, which I think actually is the thing that we can really do as a group of people. And I'm delighted that Rupa is here, because she's going to talk more broadly about this idea of food as being something that we as doctors, as clinicians, as healthcare workers, can really bring forward and make positive contribution to food sustainability, security, not just for ourselves, but for our communities and around the world. And it's great that she's going to concentrate on her talk on that. So look, the climate emergency, it's just something we have to have something to say on. And, I don't know how to be more passionate than I am about it. We've got to say something about this, and we've got to do something about it. The second one is what I call existential dystopian. And that is artificial intelligence now is pervasive. It's being driven by a small number of tech bros in the world who are driving a crazy investment in this technology. I was at a meeting yesterday called Patient Solutions, where people were showing all sorts of amazing, dazzling effects. But the reality is that we have choices to make in relation to AI and healthcare. We're looking at the replacement of human capital machines. Anybody who doesn't get that is not at the races. This is a choice we have to make. We have to make the choice that we're not going to be replaced, and that the human in the loop and the human, albeit aided with AI, is going to have to be the limit at which we decide we're prepared to go. Because, by the way, the financial situation will be to replace doctors, to replace nurses. By the way, doctors will be replaced a hell of a lot faster than nurses, because there'll be massive needs for robotic changes in order for nurses to be replaced. And then the idea of machine agency, the idea that machines will develop some agency and be equivalent to human beings. This is where the accountability thing comes apart. People are saying, oh, look, there's always going to be human in the loop. The doctor or the human will always have a responsibility. But agency will develop, some sort of ersatz agency will develop in machines. And again, the finances and modern capitalism will push the agenda that machines have agency, enough agency to take away the decisions that you can make for your own family and that your healthcare team can make for you. It's absolutely going to happen unless we decide it won't happen. And of course, the sustainability issues feed into the first question. The Danes have calculated that in the next 5 years, their use of water to cool down data centers will be 6 times the use of water now. So if you don't understand that the use of AI, the ubiquitous growth of AI has a significant effect on the environmental challenges, then again, you're not at the races. So they're the two big, huge challenges as I see it. If I go down to the ambition of the medical school, and these are very broad categories and subject to change, I think we need to reform undergraduate and postgraduate curricula to develop this human in the loop idea for both climate and AI, and to create an ethic that never puts the human outside the AI loop, no matter what the financial situation, no matter what the tech bros say. I think the medical school has to have a response to the climate emergency in terms of its internal and external policy pronouncements, advocacy, research, education, and this is where the Land, Food and Medicine programme, which we hope to develop, and I'm delighted again that Rupa is going to talk to that. We do want to develop graduate entry medical school, which will be built around innovation, health equity, and artificial intelligence, again, putting that AI safety and AI ethic at the centre of that. And then more prosaically, maybe, bringing the hospital and the university closer in an enhanced academic partnership. I think, again, if we create that partnership around sustainability and the climate emergency, then I think it'll be very successful. And obviously, on the right-hand side of the picture, I think we can and should be aligning with the principles of Thrive, which is a new university strategy. I don't see there's any reason why we should have a new strategy. I think we need to map ourselves very closely to the principles of Thrive, which I think are really good. The idea of purpose, people, and place. Yes, we will have specific things in the School of Medicine, and like I've put here, like a graduate entry School of Medicine is not going to be, something that will map immediately to Thrive, but we can make it. We can make the school strategy be really an implementation strategy. And I suppose I've done this Venn diagram. I kind of drew this roughly on a page to show the intersections, but not just within the school, within health sciences, and with the whole university and with the society in general. So look, having a response to the climate emergency is an absolute given. We have to do it. There's just no two ways about it. Yes, we want to develop closer relationships with the hospital in our academic partnerships. And we want to deliver a graduate entry course. And we need to upskill and update our curricula in relation to all these things. The other health sciences, maybe apart from graduate entry medicine, we share huge need for interprofessional learning across undergraduate, postgraduate courses. On the academic health science campus, we're together. And obviously, I would hope that the health sciences would have a joint response to this climate emergency. And the rest of the university, again, has all of these things under its purview. Everything happening in social sciences, in STEM, in genetics, in microbiology, in the humanities and social sciences includes all of these things. And then in the wider society, we're deeply embedded with everyone in that. And you can see right at the center of that Venn diagram is artificial intelligence, sustainability, and health equity. And I don't think we can get away from making those three things absolutely critical to address together as a full university, but also as individual schools. By the way, this is not just me pontificating, deciding I'm going to ride this agenda. I feel strongly about this personally. I do feel personally strongly about this. But when we surveyed the School of Medicine recently about the plan, here's what they came up with. People wanted us to talk about planetary health. They wanted us to talk about sustainability and education for sustainable development. They've asked for preventative medicine and healthcare, treating people, not diseases, high quality interdisciplinary healthcare, professional education and research. That came from the School of Medicine. Human in the loop, data science, AI, digital health, simulation, robotics. Human in the loop being the key word there. Emphasize staff, student well-being, collaboration, academic integrity, and defense of science and impact, and enhance international links and collaboration. So, it's not just me. I'm reflecting very much the agenda that's coming through the surveys. And I just want to maybe show that. Sorry, this last slide was the school executive. That was the school executive. We went to the whole school. Now, we had very minimal response, and this happens, unfortunately, with thousands of emails to receive every week. We had 66 responses to 1,000 responses. This is school-wide. But they said significant overhaul needed in leadership, organization, and culture. That goes back to our prosaic, historic governance problems that we need to fix. embed system-based approaches to lifespan conditions, well-being, and precision medicine, create collaborative learning atmosphere among students and staff, international collaboration and exchange of ideas, and address climate change, AI, and health equity. There it is again, bold as brass, right coming out of the responses. And then finally, I decided to amalgamate 2 surveys that we did between 2023 and 2025, particularly in relation to students, looking particularly at culture. Students in 2023 expressed frustration with teaching and well-being, fragmentation, low morale, lack of leadership clarity. So the school should be moved from listening. We do a lot of listening, a lot of surveys, a lot of tick this box, to acting, visible responses to the cultural problems we have in the school. From individual experience, and that's really important to an institutional ethos. You go back to this, you're standing there, you're looking at the Lancet Commission, 3 issues to address in climate, and what do you do as an individual? Well, you have to be part of a group. It has to be institutional. And then patchwork reform to strategic identity. We need to define 3 to 5 flagship themes, and I've started that process, and I've committed to my executive today, before Christmas, to have these 3 particular flagship programs that we're going to deliver, align education, research, and partnerships around them. So again, this is not just me. Our students and our staff are saying the same thing. And I asked ChatGPT as a sort of a little prompt. I said, draw me a picture of the amazing, fantastic capability of modern medicine. Things like CRISPR technology, that you can now address the 12,000 metabolic diseases that affect children, fix their genes and give them a normal life. This incredible technology. Immunotherapy for cancer, which has completely changed the analysis and the issue of cancer, moving from a death sentence to a chronic disease. And then new mRNA technology for the treatment of and the rapid production of vaccines. Look at all these amazing technologies, right? Here's you, the researcher, doing that work. By the way, providing it for a very, very, very small number of people, okay? And you're rowing to work. Because if you don't do the climate stuff, the rest of it is all rubbish. And by the way, these are people from the global south who are moving from uninhabitable places now and coming to this country. And unless we put up these walls, unless we have a plan in order to welcome these people and to address their health needs, the only way we're going to do it is become fortresses. So my final slide, what have I learned from all this? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well-being and belonging must be planned. I remember I don't know how many religious people are on the call, and I'm not a religious person. I consider myself an atheist, but St. Thomas Aquinas said one of the most amazing things. He said to me, you can teach compassion. You're not born with it. It's a teachable skill, okay? So the idea of equity and well-being and compassion, these are things that you can be taught. You can make that the ethos of the university. I think on the governance side, I love this quote. It's Robert Victory's third law of politics. The only way to understand the behavior of a public institution is that it must be run by a cabal of its enemies. Nobody would plan to do it this way. You know, there must be somebody who said, here's how we'll make, Colin Doherty not achieve what he wants to do. What we'll do is we'll give him 9,500 emails every month. We'll make him spend 44 hours on email, so that he can't engage widely with people that he needs to engage with in the society, in the political realm, within the clinical campuses. And that's the only way you can really understand it. Why would we have a situation where I'm spending my time answering 9,000 emails? The other problem, this is a really big one, being the best has the hazard of people feeling that we're making up problems to address. So we've been the best medical school, we have the best researchers, we've been like that for a long time. So the idea that we have to change, some people say, well, what problem, Colin, are you trying to create here? We're the best, If we were the worst, it would be easy. People would say, we're the worst, we need to get better. If we don't have a response to climate and AI emergencies, we're lost. Simple as, somebody can convince me in the rest of these talks that that's true. In the next 25 years, you're going to be rowing to work. In the interprofessional learning space, I acknowledge the School of Medicine is always the laggard. I get it. The doctors are always the last people to understand the importance of interprofessional learning. But I would say to you this, the hopeful thing is that in that executive survey, the idea of interprofessional learning was on that list. So we're not completely lost to it. And I'll just read out this paragraph. This was from an article by Laura Whitaker about 10 years ago, and it was about the Ford Foundation in America. So the urge to change the world is normally thwarted by near insurmountable barricade of obstacles. Failure of the imagination, failure of courage, bad governments, bad planning, incompetence, corruption, fecklessness, the laws of nations, the laws of physics, the weight of history, the inertia of all sorts, the psychological unsuitability of the part of the would-be changer, the resistance of people who would lose from the change, and my favourite one, the resistance of people who would benefit from the change, the seduction of activities other than world-changing, lack of practical knowledge, lack of political skill, lack of money. Lack of money is a stubborn obstacle, but not as hopelessly unyielding as some of the others. And I really do believe that. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Colin. I think, yeah, a great start, I think, to the discussion. A lot of things thrown out there. Just to remind everybody who are on the call that you're very welcome to put questions or comments into the Q&A box on the Zoom. And after we have the three speakers, we'll go through some of those, as many as we can, and hopefully that will fuel and encourage the panel discussion as well. So please, the Q&A is open. You're very welcome to. We'd love to get your feedback and any comments therein. So thanks again for that, Colin. I think I'd like to maybe just move on now with having set the scene to Rupa Maria's talk. Professor Maria, I'll let you maybe talk a little bit about yourself, Rupa, and I think you have some slides as well that you want to share that you can put up. There you go.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Rupa Maria. I just want to thank Colin for his visionary and courageous leadership. And I'm so sorry. It's actually 9,000 emails a day. That's preposterous. So where are we going? The future is radical inclusion. And who is driving it? Is the earth, Bridget, the microbes, the ancestors, however you want to say it. But the earth is telling us what she needs. And I'm just going to give a little background about myself so you know where some of these wild ideas are coming from. So I am a physician. I have been practicing hospital medicine for 24 years at the University of California. I've also been involved in movements for social inclusion of people who've been historically marginalized in the United States. Right now, that's about half of the country is now deemed a pre-criminal if they do not agree with the agenda of what's happening. I'm also a musician. I've been touring around the world for about 25 years, and that work going between medicine and music is really what landed me in this space of doing work around food systems. I also want to let you know that this is a time that we have to stand in courage. I am a physician who was fired for taking a vocal stance about the genocide in Gaza from my position at UCSF. The last time I took on a lawsuit, we won $14 million and liberated the song Happy Birthday, which was claimed to be owned by Warner Chappell. And our request is that we all got our money back. That was $14 million went back to artists who used Happy Birthday in recordings or videos. And also to claim that it was in the commons or in the public domain. And this is really a time where we have to struggle for our right to access to nature, to healthy water, to healthy food, to healthy land, to a commons. And so how are these things related? So here you see on the left-hand side, soil erosion and compaction. These are fields in Ireland where the water is not able to get through because of the farming practices. In the middle there, we show the forests in Ireland. So about 12% of the land in Ireland is forested. It used to be 80%. So we're here in Ireland, it is and used to be an Atlantic rainforest that's missing its forest. And then we have these rising rates of colon cancer, colorectal cancer in younger and younger people. While this data is from the United States, it's being reflected here in Ireland as well. And the way these things are related are through a toxic food system, a food system that was created 600 years ago in a time of empire, and has been used to generate wealth for very few people, extract wealth for very few people, while leaving the rest of us to suffer the consequences. The recent Lancet Commission, the EAT Lancet Commission, talked about a planetary health diet and the impacts it could have. And the big takeaways here is that we could be saving 40,000 lives a day, as well as cutting greenhouse gas emissions or climate-related emissions from agriculture by half through changing the way our food system operates, through changing the way we eat, the way that we relate to food. And that's a lot of the work that I've been focused on at the intersection of health, colonialism, and climate. This paper came out this year in Nature Medicine, which I found really interesting. And it was a relatively small sample size, about 77 people. And they looked at what happens if you just change African people's diet from a traditional African ancestral diet to a Western diet. And within 2 weeks, they saw markers of inflammation go sky high. And then they said, okay, well, what if we take people on a Western diet and put them back on a ancestral diet that included a fermented beverage? And within 1 week, those markers fell. And these are being mediated, these changes are being mediated by microbes. And the microbes inside and on our body confer us with health. Our relationship to those microbes confer us with health. And when we look at the biodiversity of microbes in our bodies, on our bodies, we see that modern people living in modern industrialized societies with food systems like the one here in Ireland have the least biodiversity on planet Earth. And people who are living with relationship to the ecosystems in which they are raised, in which they tend, specifically indigenous people, small-scale horticulturalists around the world, have the greatest biodiversity. These people also do not experience the scourge of chronic inflammatory disease that modern industrialized people do. And when we look at indigenous communities, so people who are living the ways that they have for 10 to 30,000 years now, we're seeing that 5% of the human population, which is indigenous and living with those ancestral practices, are stewarding 80% of the world's biodiversity right now. So what is it about those worldviews and practices that confer them with health, with a resiliency to inflammatory disease, as well as resiliency to the impacts of climate change? And this is the work I explored in a book with Raj Patel, who is an economist and a nutritionist actually in Texas. So we wrote a book about this concept that we elucidated called deep medicine. So whole systems medicine. If poor health is being driven by structural change or by structures that confer poor health, how do we change those structures in order to allow health to be possible? And that is the concept of deep medicine. So the medicine that I've been trained in, as I went to Georgetown Medical School in Washington, D.C., trained as a resident and intern at UCSF, we call that shallow medicine. This is medicine that focuses on individuals' problems, goes down to precision medicine. That is helpful and useful in some way, but as Colin just spoke about, there's going to be masses. There's masses of people who are hungry right now. How are we creating the most food we ever have, throwing away more food than we ever have, and have more people hungry on planet Earth than we've ever had before? So food insecurity is a big issue. And deep medicine creates the context and situation, the structures around in our society and in our environment that can confer health. So what we looked at our book in Inflamed was how structures created through colonialism, created through our current socioeconomic reality, have drive inflammation in our bodies, in our societies, and in the planet. And what we know about inflammation is that it is an ancient evolutionarily conserved response of the innate immune system to damage or the threat of damage. And I'm not going to belabor this for all the scientists in the room, but I thought this was interesting. Inflammation is actually a healing response to restore homeostasis in the event, in the threat of damage. And what we see is that the sum of our lifetime exposures, or the exposome, is actually more predictive for the development of chronic inflammatory diseases, such as all the ones I treat as a hospital medicine physician. The exposome is more predictive of developing an inflammatory disease than even our genome. So what are the things in our exposome that we can actually control and shape? And that goes from everything from our history here in Ireland as the original place where the settler colonial structures were innovated 600 years ago and then exported around the world, to structures of power, to the cosmologies, the way we see things. There was a fascinating study out of Canada which showed that First Nations people that speak their language and that have cultural continuity are actually protected from the development of diabetes and also protected from youth suicide, which I thought was fascinating. To the stories that we tell. And so for this reason, the exposome is something that involves everything from the ways that we interact with each other, the ways that we care or don't care for each other, to the social structures that we are all operating in. On a molecular level or a cellular level, what is happening inside our bodies is fascinating. So when we look at a toxic exposome, so an exposome that drives inflammation, what we see is that replicating cells, our somatic cells, are aging prematurely through damage. And cells that age prematurely through damage go through a cell cycle arrest, an early senescence, they remodel their DNA, and then they take on a phenotype called the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, where they essentially start generating and pumping out pro-inflammatory molecules in all of the tissues where they're located. And this is sort of the underlying process of what we call inflammaging. So people with dementia, elders aging with dementia, that is not a normal process of aging. That is an inflammatory aging condition. And what we're seeing now is these SASP cells are now involved in every pathological process that we take care of as physicians. And then all these diseases that we've seen and studied, these SASP cells are creating localized inflammation in the tissues where they exist. So how do we change that? How do we change that damage of a toxic exposome? And so with my touring in music, as I started going around the world, I started meeting with different community members. When I would go play music, people would come and grab me and say, you have to come see our clinic. You have to come see our community. And I would be let into these conversations around what is happening. And so what I started to notice is that communities where the food system was intact and locally based, where there was a lot of sovereignty of how people source their foods, as well as how they gathered around food, those communities did not have the burden of inflammatory disease that modern industrialized societies do. And so looking at the food system today, and this was based off of California, where the farms that I work on are based, it is based in stolen land, so indigenous genocide, erasure of indigenous people, fossil fuel-based inputs. We see damage to the soil. We see damage to the food, so less nutrient density in the foods grown through conventional agriculture, decreased yields, which then require more inputs, pesticide residues on the foods, dietary chemicals added to the foods, farmers exploited. Right now, farmers are being rounded up by ICE throughout California. People aren't showing up to work. And the profit of that system leaves the system. It leaves the circle. It goes to farmers. Actually, a lot of the biggest farmer in California, actually in the world, are the Resnick families. They're sending their profits to Israel to fund the genocide. So they fund directly Elbit Systems, which makes those drone quadcopters that have been shooting children and healthcare workers in Palestine. Farming as medicine is a vision that we created to in these farms in partnership with California Native people and communities groups in California to look at what happens if we innovate a system based in health. So if we work to give land back to indigenous people, if we reframe farmers as the frontline stewards of our health through how they steward soil, if we give indigenous people their sovereignty back in their homelands, if we work to restore soil biodiversity. And what we're seeing through our system is health at every level, from the soil to the people to the food. And it has been truly remarkable. Our Farming as Medicine program in California is based on 4 pieces: land back to California Native people in partnership with them. Farmers are health stewards, so we pay our farmers very well to take care of the soil, like healthcare workers. We give away all the food we grow for free, and we reassert food as medicine. And so here we work on a 1-acre rooftop farm in Oakland, which has been an amazing outdoor classroom for students in the urban environment to learn about, how to address climate dynamics with this roof captures storm water drainage. It also lowers the heat island effect in the urban environment. And we grow about 20,000 pounds of food on it every year, which is incredible. And all that food goes for free. We teach a lot. We just teach all the time, from 5-year-olds to 90-year-olds. It's been really wonderful. We also work on a rural farm, a 38-acre farm right near the ocean there, in the San Gregorio watershed. And on this farm, we grow and give away about 36,000 pounds of food a year. And we employ about 15 farmers, which has been incredible. And so that food is going to our communities. It's going for free as organic produce that we're giving to people who have food insecurity. And food is becoming a mechanism of relationship, of drawing communities together, of doctors and nurses working together in the field with medical students and residents and patients, not only through the growing of the food, but also through giving it away. And what we're also seeing as we do this work is that the soil is coming alive, and the soil we recognize has memory. And here in California, that's me on the farm with a bunch of CEOs or the executive suite of Apple who planted our orchard. And they are learning about the genocide that happened right there. And on where we are kneeling right there is a village site. It'll be the first village site that goes back into the hands of Ohlone people there on the San Francisco Peninsula. And so if soil has memory, what we are growing and eating is partly that memory. And there are stories in the soil, stories in the land. And so and what we're seeing with our farming systems by using agroecology and by restoring indigenous practices to the land is an abundance of biology. So the biology is just booming. We're working with soil scientists at UC Berkeley, at the Climate Lab, at Lawrence Berkeley Labs, and at Stanford. And what we're seeing is that the cultivation of our soil is increasing the biodiversity. It is increasing the carbon footprint. The carbon is sinking into the soil. Sorry, not footprint, but the nematode footprint is increasing. This carbon is sinking into the soil. And then the bulk density, the compaction of the soil is opening up so that that water can circulate and move through the land. We're reconnecting people to land. We're reconnecting people to each other through processes of storytelling, through sharing how we came here from these different diasporic communities and indigenous people working together. And we're teaching food as medicine, which has been really exciting. We always incorporate the arts into our work because we know that well, if we talk about keeping the human in the loop, it's keeping the humanity in the loop. So as we're talking about life and the earth and our relationships in healing, that also includes our spirit and how we are nurtured through storytelling and art. So I was brought here very gratefully by Colin to start thinking about what does farming as medicine look like in Ireland. So in Ireland right now, there are over 100,000 farmers and only 4,000 create food for people who live in Ireland. Over 80% of the food here is imported from off the island, which makes it extremely at risk when you have a storm like Storm Dara that shut off the port coming in from Wales. Over 60% of the calories of an average Irish diet comes from ultra-processed foods. These dynamics reflect Angkor Thomor. So the people living right now, you all are the 7th generation since Angkor Thomor, since the Great Starvation of the Irish people. There's no food security or sovereignty with that current system. In the 1990s, this was an interesting statistic I just learned. There were over 400 Irish horticultural farms. There are now less than 60. Less than 60 farmers in Ireland farm food for Irish people to eat, which is just, I mean, this is by that I mean fruits and vegetables, which is just extremely vulnerable. When we look at things like Angkor Thomor during the famine, during the so-called famine, there were people who, these were an image of the wreckers. I just learned there were over 250,000 families who were evicted at the time of starvation. So when we're looking at these practices and policies, and right now the rise of homelessness in Ireland and the manufactured scarcity of housing in Ireland, where there are 2 Airbnb rentals for every student housing unit in Ireland, these are structures, and these structures can be re-innovated. But that this is the history that we're up against. And so as we think through that, how do we innovate a system that can be healing of the earth, of people's relationship to one another, of people's relationship to the land? And this is where we're starting to think about a Center for Land, Food, and Medicine at St. James Hospital. We are looking at how to reimagine the food procurement pathways to go directly to Irish agroecological farmers to grow food and to partner with health care workers, health educators, and scientists, natural scientists, to look at what happens when we grow food in this way that reawakens in a land-based connection for people in Ireland. I'm happy to share these slides with everyone, but we have an incredible group of partners from between Trinity, St. James, and several different farms who are coming up to do this work, as well as community-based organization like Talamh Beo. We just had an amazing food sovereignty summit at Trinity that talked about the scope of the work of this Irish agroecological farming group. We have been out to the Balrath farm in County Meath at the border of Meath and Louth. There's a farm there that is interested in partnering with us to give almost like a nature campus to us in the School of Medicine, School of Business, School of Natural Sciences to look at modeling. What would it be like to have the procurement for a hospital be offered from an Irish farm? Like, how would that change the economics? How would that change the culture? We were also out at the Kyrie Farm, which is a therapeutic farm model that is coming up in County Kildare, which has been really beautiful to see a mental health therapeutic idea for a farm as well. Right now, we're in the midst of designing and thinking through how do we build a new hospital kitchen at St. James, and this is actually underway right now. These are some of the thoughts that we brought to the table was, well, let's put a rooftop garden, let's enclose it with a greenhouse, and let's start growing some food and getting patients involved in this work. So I'm just going to close, I know, sorry, a little bit over, close with this quote by Cesar Chavez: "To make a great dream come true, the first requirement is a great capacity to dream. And the second is persistence." So I am honored to be here with you at Trinity and look forward to building this work together. Thank you.
Rupa, thank you so much. And I think it continues on the theme of, really blue sky, or I mean, what I guess is sort of new, very new concepts for many people. I'm sure some are familiar with more of the details. So yeah, very, very interesting and exciting ideas. And again, reminding everyone you're quite welcome to put in comments or questions. I think we'll just move on to our third and final speaker of this part of the forum, and I'll ask Laurent Muzelec to fire away. Laurent, you have the floor. I think you said you don't have any slides, so we'll let you go freestyle.
I know. So thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. And yes, I came naked to this forum, without any PowerPoint presentation, which I'm sure you'd be surprised coming from the business school. But I'm just going to talk about a couple of things. So I'm afraid I won't be as inspirational as Colin and Rupa there. I'm just going to talk through to you about a strategy, two phases of strategy that we've had in the business school, and how we went to implement that strategy, those strategies. So the first point is, I guess, for me, I'd like to explain that we went through two phases. The first phase is a high growth strategy between 2015 and 2022-23. And then the new strategy, which is called Transforming Business for Good. And I'll rebound on the comment of Colin saying, like, why do we need to change when everything is going well? Well, actually, for the first strategy, it was very easy because we've just published a book there, which is like Marching with Time and celebrating the 100 years of the Trinity Business School. And of course, like, we put a very good spin on the various period that we went through, and we have a great heritage. And indeed, we created one of the first MBA. The Trinity Business School created one of the first MBA in Europe. We have very successful undergraduate program with BES and great alumni and all of those things. So we have an heritage to celebrate. But the reality is, when we actually had to implement a new strategy come 2015, the school was not, or before that, let's say from 2000 to 2010, the school was not in a great place, to the point that there was no senior leadership willing to take the leadership of the school. It was very small. And in effect, the school was actually approached by UCD or the university was approached by UCD to merge the two business schools. So that kind of triggered a kind of survival instinct at top level and sufficient buy-in at the bottom level. So the school embarked on a high growth strategy and decided at the time, the provost decided to build a new business school. And when I say build a new business school, it's literally a building and the school and the content that goes into that building. So I'm not going to take you through the detail of a plan like this, but essentially the plan was a business case negotiated with the financial service division, and the business case is about building a new business school, paying for servicing a mortgage that pays for that business school, be financially autonomous, and make a surplus, a cash flow, if you want, towards the university. So how this, in the same time, of course, and the idea behind that financial business case is the idea of becoming the #1 business school in Ireland and one of the top business school in Europe. Okay, so I'm not going to go too much into the detail of how did this happen, but there's a lot of work, as you can imagine, to do this. In our case, it was done by creating a lot of postgraduate specialized program. We moved from 3 or 4 postgraduate program and roughly 200 students to more than 1,000 students. This is the market, if you want, that the business school thought we could serve. The research output, the recruitment plan, all of this is kind of a number associated with all of those things and target to be achieved. All of this followed, and through recruitment, creating new program, we moved from a school that was maybe a 7 million turnover to something that is around 33 million turnover. Grew our number of academic, grew our number of students at postgrad from 200 to more than 1,000. We grew, and of course, doing all this in a qualitative way, improving the research output, improving our ranking. We're now like the 24th business school in Europe, according to the Financial Times, the first in Ireland, according to QS, and basically our metrics seems to be above what Trinity is overall, when, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago, we were not even ranked. So the story is very positive. In terms of one point that I want to say as well is, again, I'm going to bounce back on what Colin said about culture, eat strategy for breakfast. And that's a very important point. And I guess that will bring me to the second phase, which is the phase we are in now, which is transforming business for good strategy. Something that was initiated by my predecessor, Andrew Burke, and that I have now refined around 3 pillars that actually very much match the idea that Colin already mentioned, which are climate change and climate action, technology, AI, and the responsible use of it, and then finally social inclusion. And to put a strategy like this in motion, you need buy-in from your faculty, and you need support from the university, or in our case, we're at school level, from our faculty. So the buy-in from the faculty, in a way, when you implement a new strategy, whether it's a high growth or the transforming business for good strategy, is kind of facilitated by the governance of Trinity, which is an election-based, and the election becomes like an opportunity to present a platform and a vision for the school. And then whether or not that, once that vision is accepted by the majority of people, then it's a lot easier then to implement it. There are difficulties in our case. Once you want to implement your vision, there are cultural elements that are very difficult to grasp and to manage, because culture is very subtle. There is no hard metrics for it. It requires a lot of buy-in from individual people who are individually brilliant, but also free agent as academic. So that's a real challenge to create that momentum. So you need that vision, and it's great to hear, like, when you have a big vision, and then you need like implementation strategy. So the implementation, after, to be perfectly honest, needs to map to the school strategy. And so each of our division, if you want, at undergrad, postgrad, but also other operation elements are represented at the school executive, and each of them have a very defined KPI. For example, the number of programs that we're going to launch in the sustainability area needs to be mapped and clearly defined. Okay, so I won't bore you, and I won't scare you, to be honest, with the Excel spreadsheet that we have that actually, outline what we want to achieve, where we are, and all of those things. But I can give you an example. For example, I'll give you the example of social inclusion. We want like 10% of our, ultimately in 2030, of our student body to be coming from socially underprivileged background. And we do that through the Trinity Access program and the Pathway to Business. So we have a plan to increase the number of students and support them financially well. We need to map this by numbers and see an evolution on a yearly basis. So there's a lot of examples like this, number of new programs that we launch at executive level, at postgraduate level. We have plans to develop new programs at undergraduate that actually addressed with other schools the idea of climate action. So that needs to be mapped out. The final point that I will do is that it is very important, and I think it's very good that you have a forum talking about long-term strategy at a faculty level, because the reality is you have 3 layers, or at least of within the governance of an institution like Trinity. You have the individual stakeholders, all the academic and professional staff. You have the school level, you have the faculty level, and you have the university level. So mapping your goals to the university and to the faculty is very important. The other things I would say, and for me, the difficulty, Colin was complaining about the number of email. What I found very difficult, and especially what we have found very difficult in our high growth strategy, is the fact that it was actually driven by college and the school rather than the faculty level. And that also led to a certain level of frustration when it came to promotion, because you want people to align, and all of those things being aligned so that people do deliver and are recognized for the work that they are doing on the ground, that is aligned with the school objective and supposedly aligned with the university objective. And we found that very frustrating. Over the last 10 years, I think we have had only 5 people who have been promoted through the internal promotion system. And I think, to be fair, none of them really took a big role in the high growth strategy. So that's a very big source of frustration, and very important actually, because you need to maintain that culture by aligning goal, strategy, reward, and incentive in order to create that culture that goes in the direction that you want to shape. So I think I'll finish on that note. I think the big vision is extremely important, but and you need to be aligned. I do believe that most reasonable people will recognize the fact that climate change is an issue. It's systemic. It's it's a threat to our own or being. We will also recognize that AI has consequences, that are much more, much deeper than just being the technical aspect of AI. It's an anthropological issue, if you want to put a big word on it. And so how do we mitigate this phenomenon that is imposed on us? And I do believe actually that we have even within Ireland a wealth inequality problem that should be addressed through social inclusion and access to resources, and in particular education, and which this is what we're trying to do. So the devil is in the detail. So having metrics that align with your strategy is extremely important. Having the ability to measure those goals is very important. And then having a system that continuously motivate people on an individual level to deliver on those metrics is also important. So I think I'll finish by saying well done on this strategy. I hope there will be more than talk to follow, and that each of you individually will take on board a few tips and source of inspiration to move Trinity forward in this after this forum. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lauren. That's really, I think, also really, really important what you said, because, clearly any strategy, no matter how worthy and how, exciting, needs the cold, hard sort of framework for implementation. And without that, nothing is really going to happen. So I think very good advice there. And I think it will depend on advice from yourself and people like you to really, to begin to implement some of these ideas that we have in our minds. So again, I'd like to thank our three speakers there. We'll let them maybe just catch their breath for a moment. And I'd like to turn to our panelists to sort of bring the discussion forward. We have Shari Bazdeo from the TTMI. I suppose you can maybe say a word about yourself, Shari. Derek Sullivan from the Dental School, and Sarah Burke from Public Health and Primary Care. Maybe I'll let each of you just very briefly introduce yourself, and any comments on what you've heard from the speakers, anything that resonated with you, or any questions you think you'd like to bring forward. So Shari, maybe we'd start with you.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Shari. I'm based up here in the Trinity Translational Medicine Institute. I'm an assistant professor in clinical medicine, and I'm delighted to be here to discuss this fantastic kind of strategic development and our future vision. I really enjoyed the speaker, so thank you all so much. I suppose just as a comment, I suppose for us, in terms of our own strategic development here on the hospital site, I hadn't really heard, Rupa, that there was long-term vision to kind of grow our own food here in St. James. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. I think hearing from Laurent as well, who kind of mentioned this idea of creating models that can be financially self-sustaining. So I think in the School of Medicine, we have an opportunity here with our fourth level programs to kind of do that and to fund amazing visionary stuff like this. I suppose as a comment, perhaps, I would love embedded in that vision. I'm kind of wondering, is there a strategy towards building a consortium around how it is we measure the evidence that comes out of this kind of a more holistic approach to health and well-being? Can we as researchers really kind of dig in here in St. James's and more widely in the faculty to really understand the mechanisms by which these processes are going to actually bring about better health?
Yes, that's the best part of this whole story. Not only the faculty at St. James and Trinity, but actually IMMA right across the street has reached out because they got wind of the work that I do and that some of the partners will be bringing in. So the community-based partners would love to enter research relationships. So the farmers at Talabio want to understand what's happening to the soil. The Matt Saunders with the School of Natural Sciences, very excited to have something that could plug into the E3 strategy, to the climate strategies. So absolutely. And not only that, but then the social sciences and the humanities, the arts and the humanities. What does it mean to reconnect to land and to each other? What does it mean to be Irish right now in this moment where we're seeing, just horrific violence against people who are escaping their own, horrific realities and wherever they're coming from? And so absolutely, we're just at the very beginning. And so I look forward to building the kinds of gatherings together to have a broad sense of what kind of research questions we can be asking.
Yeah, good point. Derek, do you want to hop in there, I wonder?
Sure. So my name is Derek Sullivan. I'm currently the acting head of school in dental science. And just to be upfront, I'm not a dentist. So when I see myself on a panel giving perspectives from dental science, I'll be maybe a little bit more they're personal rather than representing all dentists.
It's all One Health now, Derek. You don't have to be.
I'm not even an oral health. I'm healthcare. I'm a microbiologist, and I might come to that in a second. There's a lot to unwrap. I think from each of the slides from Colin and Rupa, we could probably spend a whole day talking about each of those. So where to begin? But where I begin is possibly because I have an attention span of a goldfish. I think it was Colin's very last sentence. There's a little bit of positivity. I mean, there's a lot of, obviously, there's a lot of things changing in the world right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's always helpful. There's a little bit of doom and gloom, but something where we work together as a faculty and some evidence of that. And I think one of the circles in your Venn diagram, Colin, was where the four schools come together, and that was interprofessional education. And that is four schools have come together and done something fantastic. And I'm delighted to see both Emer Barrett and Emer McGowan are part of the people attending today. When we put our minds together, we can do things, and I think we can do more together than we can separately, and that with the support of the faculty, obviously, as well. So there's a little bit of positivity there. I'm not sure we can answer the big global challenges, but we can certainly do small incremental bits. In terms of the global challenges, I'm going to add another one in there, and it's because I'm a microbiologist. Antimicrobial resistance is a huge problem, and is only going to become a bigger problem. But touching on what Rupert was saying, and it's not just antimicrobial stewardship, and it's not just the responsible prescription of antibiotics. It's the exposure of microbes to environmental antifungal agents. I'm a mycologist. All of our crops are sprayed with antifungals, so we get Aspergillus, we get Candida. All of these fungi are being exposed to these agents, and then, not surprisingly, resistance is emerging and spreading into human populations. Similarly with antibacterials in husbandry and animal farming. What the answer to that is, I don't know. My concern is big pharma. I'm not sure that they're the right people to be doing this and to be developing new drugs. There isn't the money in there that they need. And as a society, we've abrogated responsibility for treating our patients to companies, where I would have thought that should be more socialized. But that's a big existential problem to add there as well. Just in terms of, again, I have a lot of experience of education here at the dental school. I was our director of teaching and learning. And one thing I've seen, and there's a worry about the diminution of the importance of science in our curricula. And if we want to train our students for the future, we can't let that happen. They have to have the tools. What I've always said to our first years and on open days, when students coming in, we're not training you to be a healthcare worker today or in 5 years. We're training you to be doing this job in 50 years. And we can't begin to imagine. 50 years ago, we couldn't have imagined AI or the level of robotics. That was Isaac Asimov. That was Star Trek. We're already in that realm. And so we need to provide them with the tools. And just to sound trite, we believe the children are our future. These are the guys who are probably going to help us to deliver us from these problems. It might be bigger than we, my generation, can deliver. And hopefully, we've a little bit more time that I might not be having to go to work in the immediate future. But I take Colin's point that this is something that needs to be acted on sooner rather than later.
Yep. Thanks indeed. Yeah, easier perhaps to start now than wait until it's a crisis. Thanks, Derek. And Sarah, turning to you, I suppose as a public health specialist, I assume this resonates quite a bit from your point of view as well, but perhaps not.
Thanks, Brian. So just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Burke, and I'm Associate Professor and Director of the Centre for Health Policy and Management. And we're located within the discipline of public health and primary care in the School of Medicine. Although I think my medic public health colleagues, Brian, would say I'm definitely not a public health specialist. Okay, so I'm a social scientist who does research and teaches around health systems and health policy. And look, thanks to all the speakers, and sort of hard to know what to say at the end, but just to come in maybe briefly on a few things that really jumped to my mind from each of the speakers, particularly Colin and Rupa, in terms of the time frame. And I think for any of us who do research or work with at national or international level, policy level, and at a health system level, just understanding and working with that this is long haul work. And yes, sometimes things can happen quite quickly. And we saw that during COVID, there was lots of innovation and changes that happened very quickly. But generally, a lot of that health system and policy improvements we really need to see. They take decades. They take decades of research and decades of implementation. And just that patience and persistence, bit like the farming, is really needed. And also that people in our position who can hold, I think one of the real roles of academia is to hold people in positions of power and government who turn around much more quickly than we do. We're generally here for the long haul. Holding them to account over time is an important part of our work. So that's just one issue in terms of the time. And then the second, in terms of Colin's point around the existential challenge of climate, and I completely agree with him. And I think it's very encouraging to work in an institution where this is top of our agenda with people like Jane Stout in leadership roles. I was at the Climate Gateway, a meeting yesterday with Karen Wiltshire. And even if I look at people in the discipline of public health and primary care, quite a lot of my colleagues and the leadership are doing works, Professor Steve Thomas, Cathal Walsh, Matthew Chersheet, Noel McCarthy, all doing work in that climate and health space, so that it's, we are doing it. And Colin, you talked about advocacy and research and education, but I also think that policy work is also a really important part of that response to the climate crisis, that we really do need to be changing national and international policies and delivering on that change, not just doing the research and education. And related to that, and again, Brian and Derek have both touched on it, but just that I think there's a growing realization that to achieve better health, human health, we also need planetary health, and this whole concept of one health, that we can't really do one without the other. And interestingly, I think you can achieve human health without planetary health, but actually what you miss there is the equity issue. So you can improve some people's health, but increasingly you leave more behind. Whereas if we pursue the drivers of the climate emergency, then that allows us to address those really important equity issues. And then the final area that came to mind was in relation to not just communities, but also the workforce, that we're certainly in the Faculty of Health Sciences, a lot of our job is to train the scientists or the workers of care in the future, and recognizing we're at a point where there's a global shortage, there's a national shortage, but there's also significant burnout. And in an Irish context, that's related to going back to the economic crisis, but more recently during burnout or during COVID, and just that sustained driving down of the workforce well-being and motivations, and us really needing to build that into our strategies and our education and work. And absolutely, there are pools of integrating learning across faculty and disciplines, but actually we still teach in a very siloed manner. And if the national policy is integrated care, then we need to be thinking as a faculty about how we train the professionals of the future in an integrated manner, rather than train them in a very monodiscipline manner and then expect them to work in an integrated way. I've lots more things to say, but I think I'll shut up there, Brian, in the interest of other people coming in with some questions and thoughts.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sarah. As you say, I think we've had that kind of discussion that it could go in so many different directions. So no, thank you for that. And we've had some nice comments in from the audience, thanking the speakers, and really just kind of enjoying this sort of very blue sky sort of thinking about the future. I'm going to ask maybe Colin, I just want to tie a little bit together the question that came in there from Hugh, and also again Laurent's point about implementation and getting down to the specifics of things. So there's a sort of a broad question and a specific question. Broadly speaking, if you do have to sit down now and change the curriculum to reflect these things, it's a kind of a trivial thing in a way, but what has to come out to make room for some of these new ideas or concepts, or does something have to come out? And I'd marry that with Hugh's question, how to develop a framework for thinking, how it will be developed in, how the questions of posing research questions will be developed in an undergraduate curriculum. Would engagement with philosophy or psychology, for example, provide a means to develop a vehicle for critical thinking in undergraduate students? I kind of sense you would like that type of thinking, in the curriculum, but how do we make room for that, not to mention satisfy the regulators like the Medical Council?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was very reluctant to put up slides saying, here's the roadmap, because it is extremely difficult. I was trying to get to the point that Hugh was making there by drawing this Venn diagram. Like, I think I'm very conscious since I've been in here that our relationship with the other schools is kind of like a little bit mixed, Like, I think that people, I remember, I don't know who I was saying this to, but I was imagining people walking past TBSI, you know what I mean, and thinking of what goes on in that building. And most citizens who are told, there's a lot of medical research goes in there and we teach students, and they'd be all, oh, that's great, that's fascinating. But if you said it to some of the other schools and university, they might say, oh yeah, they get all the big labs and the big buildings. You know, School of Medicine is really wealthy and they get whatever they want. So I think we have a lot of repairing to do of our relationship with the rest of the university in order for their ideas to filter in. It was really that diagram that brings the whole university to bear on this problem and keeping these sustainability issues in the middle. It's really important to me. And maybe, Brian, you know, you can help me with that. I think we need to reach out. This should be maybe much more of a university discussion. And look, they've had their strategy discussion and they're sick of talking, I'm sure, at the university level. But, you know, the cultural question that Lauren picked up again with that idea, like the culture of the things that we need to create, the culture of ideas, of sharing ideas, of trusting each other. There's a lot of work to do in that. It's the stakeholder engagement thing. It's meeting people. This is why I bring up the email thing. And again, it's not about my well-being, about email. It's the opportunity cost of not being able to engage across the university, talk to people and bring them together. We really want to hear what the humanities has to say. Like, I can't imagine for a moment that people in the humanities don't want to address climate, sustainability, artificial intelligence with the School of Medicine and Health Science faculty in general. Do you know what I mean? There must be so many interesting things there for us to collaborate on. You know, Rupert talked about the narrative, the storytelling, you know, the idea of sitting around and sharing stories, which is really what engages people. We need a space to do that. I think we're really lacking in those social spaces here. That should go into it. Somebody said something to me that was really interesting about, imagine for a moment that you lived in some old Victorian house that had no straight lines and had leaks all over the place and stuff. And you would go out and get some consultant to come in and say, well, here's what you need to do over the next 5 years. You need to do all these things. Here's a list, right? I think we need that person to do that to the medical school and the university. Here's what you need to do. I'm sure there are people out, like, and it would be a range of experts, right? And they'd be coming from all over, including from marginalized communities, to get them to co-design this with us. You know, what do we need to do to make our health system, our university climate resilient, to make, like, when I was writing these slides, this idea that we have choices to make before the implementation, Brian, before the implementation Excel sheet, which I'm glad you didn't share with us, Lauren, because I know, I can only imagine what it looks like. But before we do that, can we actually, as a group of people, decide that we're not going to let machines take over? We're actually going to say that we humans are in charge of our, like, at the moment, I don't feel we're in charge. I feel there's a small group of tech bros, a small group of billionaires that would do away with all the work we do if they could. If it made financial sense to do away with doctors and nurses and healthcare workers, and it was cheaper to deliver healthcare by machine, that would happen. Like, that's the capitalist system we live in. It's very simple. It's not complicated. So we have choices to make, really important choices. And that's where philosophy and the School of Divinity and the School of, you know, there's a peace studies, you know, unit here that we never speak to. How come we don't speak to the people? Like, we are doctors. We look after people with injuries, and we don't talk to the people across the street who do peace studies, you know? So I think there's just a massive amount of engagement. If you said to me, what would I do in the next 12 months? I would just drop every feckin' email to do with HR approvals. And I would go out and I would talk to everybody in the university. And I would create think-ins, and I would have music and poetry, and I would say, come along and just give me your ideas of how do we fix this place. And yes, there's going to be very, very important, straightforward decisions about the kind of investment. Just for Cherie to think I'm not a total hippie, you know, we do have to, like, if we're going to do gene editing, really importantly, invest in that technology to address the 12,000 metabolic illnesses that children suffer, to give them a proper life. If we're going to do that, we have to do these things in parallel. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do all this thinking together, you know, and it's probably going to be a lot more women than men, because I am certainly not a multitasker in this. If you just give me one job to do, and I'll do it really well.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So look, if you're asking me the question of implementation, I said, let me engage, free me up to engage, and I will do the engagement.
Yeah, no, I think exactly, but it's a necessary, you know, it's something we have to keep in mind, is that sooner or later we have to sit down and we have to kind of get it all together and make it happen. And kind of Nora has put in, I think, a very intriguing comment as well, which I'll fire back at any of the speakers or panel. one of the characteristics of a super wicked problem is that those who are seeking to solve the problem are also causing it. So how do we tackle the commercial interests of health harming industries while maintaining rigor and objectivity and obviously being sensitive to our funders and partners in college? I mean, that is, I think, part of it. So I'll bat that to maybe anybody who wants to pick up on that.
I'll just say I'm not surprised Nora would ask us a hard question. Can we just ask Nora to ask us a sports question so that we can answer it? Like my view of that, Nora, is it's a little bit like, again, getting the consultant in. Like if somebody external comes in to say, look, here are all the the perverse incentives which in which you make decisions which actually feed the problem and don't. If we can make trustworthy consultants with people to give us this feedback, like the commercial determinants are just incredible. And like, I know that the university relies a huge amount on its commercial activity. I mean, that's just the way universities have to get by the funding structures. So look, I fully agree with you. I don't have an answer to it, but I think it's a very good observation. But I would hope that somebody would give us a roadmap out of that. None of these things, nobody's asking, we don't do this as Trinity. We don't do overnight change, right? We could do 5-year, 10-year, 20-year changes. And that's what we're thinking here. And that's why the food and its relationship to nature and the cyclical life and rebirth is such a lovely model for us to build our thinking around this. Some of the ideas we decide today, we think are great ideas. We'll ditch them in a year's time because we realize that's actually a really bad idea.
That's fair enough.
We need to have that agility.
You have to have the discussion. I don't think anybody
Exactly.
I don't think anybody minds that. It's all about having the discussion. So I'm just going to go in order of, I think, who had their hand up. Derek, Lena, Rupa, Sarah.
I'll be super quick because the experts are here. Rupa and Sarah know the answers to that question, possibly. My take is we have to collaborate with these companies. They're there. They're not going anywhere. They have the money. We don't have the money. Hopefully that they can use our expertise and we can use our voice to help them to do better, perhaps. But I think doing things on our own to their excluding them, I don't see how that will work. We need to bring them with us.
Thank you. Good. Rupa, yeah. A lot there for you to consider, I think.
Yeah, I just think coming from San Francisco, where the tech bros have entirely dismantled the whole social infrastructure, the entire social safety web. What is happening right now in Dublin with the lack of affordable housing is what we saw in San Francisco 20 years ago when the tech companies came in and took over the places where we lived. I, as a physician, had my rent increased at 3 times in 1 month. So these kinds of these are policy level interventions. So I don't think it's like we have to have kid gloves around these corporations that are actually damaging our health. We have to tax and control these corporations so that wealth that is being generated through the labor of Irish people goes back to serve the health of Irish people. And so once we start looking at, like, for example, in Berkeley, they passed a sugary drinks tax. They passed, millions of dollars now come in to directly affect, sort of offset the impacts of these horrible, these things that cause bad health for our community, to impact the health of our community. So if we look at ultra processed foods and how companies are making hand over, fist just money off of these foods that are killing us, we're at a place right now where, back in the policy of stopping public smoking, let's say, in San Francisco, in California, I think we were the first place largely to do it. Then Irish was the first nation to do the banning of public smoking. That cut fatal heart attacks and strokes by a factor that is much higher than any drug or any intervention that we've had in medicine. So just to amplify Sarah's call, that policy, the importance of policy cannot be overstated. And so the policies to actually tax those organizations, those commercial entities that are damaging the earth, damaging our health, and using that, taking that money right to improving our research and improving the education of our population so that we can counter the effects.
Indeed. Thank you, Rupa. And Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm definitely with Rupa on this, and I completely disagree with Derek, right? So I think the minute you work with them, Derek, you water down policies, you co-opt, all you do is fuel their profits and uh, hurt people's health, and particularly the people who are most vulnerable. So I completely disagree with you. And there is there's a mountain of evidence Nora and Rupa and I can provide for you if you need any to back it up. So I think what we need to do is we need to take them on. We need to do that good quality research that exposes those links between people in very profitable companies and government and people making the wrong policy choices. We need to educate our students, advocate to the public, and influence those national and public policies. And that might sound very idealistic, but I think if you stop doing that, then you just give up. You just go, okay, these lads are in charge and we're buggered, you know, and there's every reason to believe that at the moment. But if you don't still have that hope that we can change this, and there are examples of little seeds of hope of good practice, the smoking ban being one, but also even the college recent decision to around divestment from Israeli companies. You know, I think there are acts of courage that we can do locally and nationally that can have a big impact in the long term.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And Shari, we'll get on to you. And yep, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to kind of jump in maybe and suggest as well that, as well as this outward-looking thing, you know, with industry partners and the benefit or the risk of that, I think as well a lot of these kind of Q&A stuff is actually speaking to cultural change within, because we all benefit from the system, and it's how we actually change that culture. And I'd like to ask you, Laurent, to the School of Business, because you said it required a lot of buy-in, and you have this lovely spreadsheet of KPIs. But how do you measure buy-in, and how do you measure that shift in cultural change? Because it's something that's very hard to achieve, and action plans don't really get there, I don't think.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's very complicated. Well, you actually, on a very pragmatic level, you measure buy-in by the number of people who actually attend like the school meeting and the level of engagement and enthusiasm that you get from it. The problem when you have school meetings or anything like this is that you get the people who are motivated, and then you don't get the people who are drifting off, and it's the same for this meeting. There's 90 people in this meeting right now as we speak. It went down a bit. So you know, everything that we talked about like, you know, the massive problem that the planet is facing, to how we operationalize what we can do about it at our small level. And, you know, we can talk about it ad vitam aeternum, but like, yeah, the buy-in is, but there is, so you get it by the mix of like what I think epitomized like our conversation being like inspirational at some level, but at the same time extremely pragmatic. Because if you stay at the inspirational level all the time, eventually people realize this is just blah blah. Nothing's gonna change. This is just another strategic plan that is actually going nowhere fast, and people disengage. So it's this articulation between the metrics, the culture, the plan that is very subtle to implement. Yeah, and that's a difficulty. And it's true that you don't get there by answering email. You get there by meeting people, but also setting clear objectives as to what everyone is supposed to do.
Thank you. Laurent, I'm just going to keep, just before you come back in there, Rupa, Laurent, I just want to stay with you a second, because other comments have come in, you know, similar to what we were just discussing there about having a relationship, you know, with industry. Is it possible to have an ethical relationship with industry as healthcare providers and population health people and so on, you know, with pharma, with, you know, ultra processed food companies, with healthcare companies? You know, is it even possible to have an ethical relationship with them, or is that something we have to wean ourselves off completely as part of our 20-year plan, you know?
That's right. Well, okay, listen, I don't know the specific of your domain and industry and the companies being involved. But like, I do think that there is a mistake that is being made sometimes, which is like being radical is equated to being courageous, and compromising is compromising your compromising like the various dimensions that you have is compromising your ethics. So on a simple basis, what needs to happen is you need to have rules of engagement, and there's probably a list of big no that are for you not to or for that if the company is involved in, you don't want to engage with them. I mean, so for us it's pretty simple. At the basic level, we don't take money or engage in student project for, let's say, I'm just going to name something that is not within the climate area, betting company. And betting company have a lot of like analytic issues that they would love for us to get involved into solving. They have huge money. It'd be very tempting to get a chair from those guys, or get involved in projects that help them to improve their algorithm. But improving their algorithm essentially means like sucking the money out of a poor block that is addicted on his phone on betting. So we don't engage in that, and we have a list of like principles that we try to apply. Of course, like there's a lot of like other stakeholders that you want to engage in, and again, like non-for-profit organization and public entity, that's very easy. And then there's the whole gray area, and this is like this is a big gray area. So for example, I'll take the example of Rupa. Like for us at the business school, would it be reasonable not to engage with like the digital tech company that have all established their European headquarters here in Dublin? I mean, no, it wouldn't. It would be catastrophic. It would be madness. What we may choose to do for our wisdom is something that is there for debate. So maybe in medicine and health and science, the cut is a little bit clearer, but it's the same with the attitude with AI. Like we can say, well, AI, we don't want AI to replace human being. But it is replacing human being. It's already happening. It's there, and it's moving faster, and it has more money than any of us will be able to pull together. Billions of so we live in a capitalist system. We can influence it through policy changes. We can certainly vote one way or another. But we have to be reasonable about what we can and cannot do. And I know this is not very inspiring, but I feel that this is a better way to achieve on a daily basis, personally.
Thanks, Lauren. As often, Rupa, I'm going to let you have the last word in a moment, but I was just going to say, as often happens, we're just getting into, I think, a really interesting part of the discussion, but we are just about out of time. So Rupa, as the guest speaker, the furthest away person, I'm going to let you have the last word, and then I think we'll have to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think, Laurent, I would love to actually so we should gather around a table and have this discussion, because this is the kind of meaty discussion that we need to have. So if we're looking at the global climate crisis, what has caused that? What are the economic drivers of that? And why are we committed to an economic system that is leading to the end of human existence in a sustainable way? And why do we call that reasonable? So to me, it's unreasonable to continue along a path that is leading straight off a cliff. And so should we be working with digital tech companies that are complicit in the genocide in Gaza? As Ireland, let's say Ireland, should Ireland, that's committed to a neutrality, be actively engaging and working with entities that are complicit in this genocide? So those are all these questions that we have to ask, like if companies are complicit in ecocide and genocide and driving us off a cliff for our health, our collective health, is that something that we negotiate with, or is that something that we take a stand against? So should health groups have an ethical relationship with tobacco companies Well, when we know that the cause of cancer, like why should we? We should just ban the public smoking. We should take some actions to protect the collective health. And that is where research and policy and academia can serve as a bulwark against the wave that you're saying right now, Laurent, that AI is here. It is taking jobs. Yes, it absolutely is. It is killing children in Gaza. It is developing hit lists of people in the United States who are being rounded up right now and put into these prisons that the Trump administration has built. So we're living in a very precarious time. We actually do need courage, and that's not radical. It's innovative, and we're being forced to innovate.
All right. Thank you, Rupa. As I said, really good discussion. I think this has been a very, exciting and interactive faculty forum. I'd like to thank Lena, as always, for behind the organization. Well done, Lena. I'd like to especially thank Colin, who really, inspired the whole thing, and it was his idea to cover this topic. I'd like to, of course, thank our other speakers, Laurent and Rupa, and our panel as well, Derek, Shari, and Sarah, for their contributions as well, and all the audience who participated fully there online. It was great to see so many people coming together, and I think clearly we've hit we've hit a nerve here of some sort, and it's maybe something we can come back to, one of those themes that came up today. We may be able to develop in the future. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lena.